Hey, welcome to what is tutorial 5 in the Setup Basics series. Long overdue, but here it is nonetheless. What we're going to do today is we're going to sort of put everything together that we've learned in the first 4 episodes so that you can make intelligent decisions when you want to adjust the setup on your car. So the first thing you want to do when you've got the program is get the uh, setup that you have on your car into the program. So enter in all your springs, spring positions, your suspension, how many shims you have or which hole it's in, all the information related to your setup, your ride heights, your cambers, all that stuff. That way, as you make changes, you'll be able to see what the effect is. So what we're going to do here is I've got a setup loaded. This is for a TRF 417. This is a car I sort of drive on a weekly basis. Um, and what we're going to do is we're going to manipulate the setup, and we're going to change the overall stiffness of the chassis, the overall responsiveness of the chassis. But we're going to be able to maintain the same weight transfer balance and same overall grip. At least that's the plan. So here's the number that we're really looking at here. We're looking at our overall chassis roll sensitivity. This number here is an indication of the stiffness of the chassis in roll, because it takes into account your center of gravity, height, your roll center positions, along with all your mechanical roll stiffness values, your springs, anti-roll bars, and so on. So it's a good indicator as to how hard or soft you have your chassis set up and roll. So I've found over the years that I've been playing with RC Crew Chief that I like this number around 0.9. The lower you get this, the twitchier it is, the harder it is to drive. For most of us, we like it a little easier to drive. I don't know about the rest of you guys, but I like finishing races pointing in the right direction, and this definitely helps you achieve that. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to adjust our shocks and springs to get this number up around 0.9. So how are we going to do that? Well, we can just change our shock positions. If we lower the upper mount down, front and rear, there we go. I've got my number up to 0.94 already. The disadvantage of doing it this way is now I have no adjustment. I really can't adjust up or down here easily. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust the lower shock. So I'm going to put these back where they were, and I'm going to move this 2 positions. And the reason I'm moving it 2 positions, if you don't know the TRF 417, it has 4 holes, but it has 2 holes on one side and 2 holes on the other, and the lower arms are symmetrical, so you can flip them over from one side to the other. I don't really want to get into flipping. I just want to move my ball stud over 2 holes. So there you can see we're at 0.89 now, so we're almost there. So we can lower this one on the rear and lower it 1 on the front, and there we are, we're at 0.94. I'm actually going to leave it at 0.94 because I know in a minute I'm going to be doing some things that are going to be increasing this number a little bit, so I want to keep a little bit of margin. So let's save this, create a new setup, and we'll save this, and we'll just call it softer setup. And we'll save that. The other thing that's nice now with the new version of the program is you have all these numbers here that you can see where you were and where you are. So right now what I've done is I've softened the ride stiffness and the ride frequency and also the roll stiffness. I haven't changed anything with the anti-roll bars. So my total roll stiffness numbers are a little bit lower, the red number being where it was, the black number being where it is now. And my front to rear roll couple, I've kept it very similar. It was at 48.6%, now I'm at 47.9. But I've made almost a 20% change in the chassis roll sensitivity, roll stiffness. Haven't changed any camber gain, haven't changed my roll centers, haven't changed any of that. So let's see, let's do a little comparison here between the two setups. So I'm going back to my original one. So this is a stiff one. So we'll have a look at our weight transfer, and the best thing to do here is to look at your mid corner point, because that's a good indication as to how well balanced your weight transfer is. And I usually use 2Gs because that's kind of the peak G value you're going to see when you get to mid corner with one of these touring cars. You may get a little above that, but 2Gs is around the highest number I've recorded. I've gone a little higher than that, but not much. So this is very well balanced, you can see here. So let's go back to our new setup and let's have a look and see if we've messed anything up there. And not really. We're maybe a little bit more on the oversteer side, but still very close to neutral handling. So that's all good. So now let's go back to our original one again and let's see what we've done to our dynamics. So we're going to look here at primarily our camber. The front suspension here right now, we have about 0.57 degrees. This is with a 10-degree steer angle on the car. We have 0.57 degrees on the outside tire and 2.38 on the inside. So that's about a 1.8 degree difference between the inside and outside wheel. And let's have a look at the rear. In the rear, we're sitting at 0.66 and 3.32. So we're still both negative, which is good. And we have about a 2.6 degree difference between the inside and outside tire. So now let's go back and let's see what our little setup change did to us. Go back to the dynamics page. So now we're looking at the front suspension again. So we were at, excuse me, 0.57. Now we're at 0.24. So we've lost 0.3 degrees of camber on the outside tire, which is our critical tire. That's the one that's developing most of the grip for us when we're going around the corner. And the inside tire is at 2.7. So now we've got a 2.5 degree difference. So we've increased the difference between the inside and outside tire, and we've lost a whole bunch of camber on our outside tire, which is not good. So let's have a look at the rear and see what's happened to the rear. So the rear is going to be very similar. So we've gone to 0.34. We were at 0.66. So we've lost 0.3 degrees of camber. And the inside tire has also widened. So we've increased the spacing here. So why has that happened? Well, the reason that's happened is the chassis is rolling more. We softened the chassis up, so we're getting more roll out of the chassis. So if we just do an animation here, we'll slow this down a little bit. And animate it. So we're rolling more on the chassis, which means our tire is rolling more onto the outside edge of the tire. Generally, more camber is good because as the G load increases, the tire carcass deforms, and you need more camber to keep as much contact, as much rubber in contact with the racing surface as possible. So what can we do to fix this? Well, let's go back to the front suspension here, and now is when we get to use our suspension arms. So what we want to do is we want to retain more camber as the chassis rolls. So how do we do that? We add camber gain. So if we shorten our upper link, that increases our camber gain. Let's go back to where we started. So we were at 0.2 degrees for a 3 millimeter movement. So if we move in here, we get a little bit more. Apply that. We get a little bit. That's not enough. So let's start lowering it. Like that. Get a little bit more. Still not enough. Let's go down to 2 millimeter. Apply that. And okay. So now we're getting close. So let's close this out. So now we have 0.5 degree and 0.21. So we're now back to our difference between these two is around 1.7. So it's actually a little tighter than what it was before, which is a good thing. The drawback is we have raised our roll center up. So let's just see what we've done to our roll center. And one thing to keep in mind is as you move your roll center closer and closer to ground, the roll center moves more and more laterally as the chassis rolls. So let's just have a look here and see how much it moves. You can see moving way out, almost outside of the track of the car. So how do we fix that? Well, let's just lower our inner hinge pin. Let's move it down to no shims. That's as far as I can go. So I'm moving this by 0.5 millimeter has lowered my roll center by about 1.5 millimeters, well, about 1 millimeter. So let's apply that and do an animation. And you can see now I've drastically reduced how much the roll center moves laterally. You know, if you can keep your roll centers 4 or 5 millimeters below ground, then the amount of movement in the roll center is much more confined, which is a good thing in my opinion. Okay, so we've adjusted the front, but we haven't done anything really to the rear. So let's do the same thing to the rear. So now, let's reset our zoom here. So now let's do the same thing. We know we had to make a fairly drastic maneuver, so let's just cut to the chase here and we'll move it. Let's not move it quite that much. Get the zoom in here to get at them. So apply that and see where we're at. So we were, before we made all our setup changes, at 0.66, so now we're at 0.59. So now we're pretty close. Our difference between the inside and outside is also better than what it was before. So that's pretty good. We've now changed our entire setup so that we're much softer, and we've also retained our camber angles so that we don't lose grip. So there's something that you can do with RC Crew Chief to make significant changes to your car and not have to spend a whole bunch of time going out on the track finding out that I lost a bunch of grip, I got to come back in, I'm going to make some other changes. It makes things a lot easier, and it also gives you a much better understanding of how it all works together, because as you make one change to the car, it definitely affects other things. So having a good knowledge of that is really going to be helpful and beneficial to your racing efforts. Okay, one last thing before we leave here, I just want to show you what the changes that we made here did to our overall roll sensitivity. So I'm just going to copy these settings back to my setup, and this is going to bring me back to the setup screen. So now you can see we are at 0.88. Before we left, we were at 0.94. So we've increased the stiffness a little bit because our roll centers moved up, which increases our chassis stiffness. You know, I didn't move the rear inner hinge pin down. It still has a 0.5 millimeter shim underneath it. If I decided that I wanted to gain a little bit more or get that roll center a little further away from ground, I could do the no shims there, and you can see now I'm back to my 0.9 value again. So that's it. So you can see here that gaining the knowledge to move around inside RC Crew Chief allows you to make multiple changes and have a good understanding of exactly what it does, and is going to make your racing a lot more enjoyable and pleasurable because you will understand setup. Well, that's it for now.